In a kingdom long forgotten by maps and hidden behind veils of myth and silence, there lived a young woman named Princess Eleanor. She was born into royalty, daughter of the iron-fisted King Aldrich, a monarch whose reign was defined by military conquests, cold calculations, and a brutal sense of order. From her earliest days, Eleanor had been trained to sit straight, smile softly, and obey. But unlike the other princesses in neighboring courts, Eleanor possessed a spirit that burned too brightly to be dimmed by protocol or submission. Her mind was sharp, her curiosity insatiable, and her heart drawn not to jewels and etiquette but to books, philosophy, and the suffering of her people. As she grew, so too did her dissatisfaction with the role carved out for her by tradition. She watched as her brothers received training in governance and warfare, while she was taught the arts of embroidery and silence. And though she was polite and poised in public, her mind rebelled constantly. She questioned everything. Why women couldn't rule, why marriages were political transactions, and why compassion was considered weakness. Her father tolerated her questions at first, dismissing them as childish wonderings. But Eleanor's defiance was not a phase, it was a growing force. She refused arranged marriages, confronted council members about unjust laws, and once even publicly criticized the king's policies in the Great Hall. That moment marked the beginning of her descent from favored daughter to dangerous threat. The king, once proud of his daughter's intellect, now saw her as a fracture in the facade of his rule. He ordered her confined to her chambers, isolated from the court, her books taken away, and her voice silenced. But even behind closed doors, Eleanor's thoughts only sharpened. Her dreams were of justice, of a kingdom where women could speak freely, where laws were made with empathy. But King Aldrich could not abide the thought of a challenge, especially from within his own blood. One night, after Eleanor refused yet another proposal and delivered a speech to the court decrying forced marriage, the king declared she had committed an act of treason against the royal family. His punishment was cruel, symbolic, and meant to destroy her spirit. He ordered Eleanor to be locked inside a royal coffin. This wasn't a simple cell or a dungeon. This was a sealed, wooden box lined with velvet and paint, meant for the dead. For a princess to be imprisoned in a coffin while still breathing was unheard of. The guards, though reluctant, followed the order. Eleanor was placed inside, her wrists bound, her cries unheard. The lid was shut tight. Darkness consumed her. The coffin became her world. Tight, cold, airless. Time lost meaning. She drifted in and out of consciousness, hallucinating at times, remembering her mother's warm embrace, her childhood laughter, and then the silence of betrayal. Her own father, her king, had buried her alive, not in soil, but in silence. She wasn't meant to die but to break. And yet, in the suffocating shadows of her confinement, something unexpected happened. Eleanor did not shatter. She ignited. Each moment in the coffin tested the limits of her humanity. Her fingers clawed at the velvet, her body stiffened with pain, but her mind found clarity. She remembered everything. Each law she read, each unjust action she had witnessed, and each tear of the peasants who begged outside the palace gates. Her rage became fuel, and her pain transformed into strategy. She mapped her escape mentally, studied the coffin's interior, and searched for weaknesses. Days passed. Her breath grew thinner, but her will strengthened. And then came the break. Using a tiny shard of a broken hairpin hidden in her dress, she managed to pick at the rusted hinges from within. Slowly, bleeding and barely conscious, she worked. And then, one morning as the dawn broke, the coffin creaked open. The air hit her face like a flood. She gasped, clawed her way out, and collapsed onto the floor of the crypt where she had been hidden. She didn't stop to weep. Eleanor rose, wounded but alive. She escaped the palace through hidden servant corridors she had memorized as a child, and disappeared into the forest surrounding the capital. There, among trees and shadow, Eleanor began again. Word of her death had spread. Her father had told the court she had passed from illness. But the truth breathed in the woods, in whispers and myths. A girl buried alive had survived. Eleanor began to gather others. Women cast out, men broken by the system, children born into silence. She listened to their stories, taught them to read, and formed a council of the forgotten. The people began to rally. The girl from the coffin had returned not to reclaim her title, but to reclaim justice. As months turned to years, Eleanor's underground movement became a silent storm. Villages rebelled in small ways, refusing taxes, hiding the wounded, printing leaflets of protest. The king's network of spies and guards could not contain the wildfire of hope Eleanor had sparked. She never showed her face in public, wearing a mask of iron carved with symbols of rebirth. Her legend grew. They called her the Shadow Phoenix, the one who rose from death. Eventually, the final blow came not from swords but from stories. A memoir appeared across the kingdom titled Buried but Not Broken. It was Eleanor's account of her coffin years, smuggled and printed by loyal scribes. The people read her pain, her resilience, her truth. The court was shaken. Nobles defected. Even some of the king's trusted men turned. King Aldrich, old and paranoid, launched a hunt for his daughter, but his army was met not by soldiers, but by civilians with pitchforks and purpose. In the final confrontation, Eleanor stood at the gates of the capital, not as a princess, but as a leader. She faced her father, not with hate, but with resolve. She demanded justice, reforms, and an end to monarchy as it stood. The people chose her. The kingdom, once ruled by fear, embraced a new dawn led by the one who had survived the coffin. Eleanor never returned to the throne. Instead, she helped build a council where every voice mattered. Her coffin remained, displayed in a museum not as a relic of punishment, but as a symbol of how even in the darkest places, fire can be born. And so lived the legend of Princess Eleanor, the girl who refused to die, and instead taught a kingdom how to live. You've just witnessed one of the darkest punishments in history. But many more still lurk in the shadows. So if you dare, subscribe to Torture Vault, where every scream from the past still echoes.